Welcome to 45 Forward with host, journalist, and speaker, Ron Rowell. Ron's mission is to make your second half of life even better than your first. Most of us are just approaching our half-life when we reach the mid-40s with many productive years ahead. Ron is here to help prepare us for this kind of longevity by providing vital strategies to shift the traditional waiting for retirement model to a continuous, evolving journey of compelling life chapters. So now, please welcome the host of 45 Forward, Ron Rowell.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to 45 Forward on Bold Brave TV. This is your host, Ron Rowell. Now, as we continue to celebrate Older Americans Month, what better way than to have a conversation today with Nancy Griffin, whose mission is to help older adults live happier, healthier lives, a mission that is totally synchronous with 45 Forward. Nancy is the founder and CEO of Glowing Older and the Glowing Older podcast, where she helps people create plans to age well, explore what really excites them, frustrates them, what they want, what they don't want, and discover what's possible in the third act of life. She'll describe her new paradigms of glowing older in housing, health and wellness, to lifelong learning. In short, Nancy's goal is to change the narrative of aging. So now let's meet my guest, Nancy Griffin, and learn what it means to glow older. Nancy, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you, Ron. We are definitely birds of a feather, and we're flocking together, which is great to have this conversation. So I love it. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I feel like we're transcontinental soulmates.
Oh, definitely. I could have spoken with you for hours on our first call.
Right. So listen, we will speak for a good hour, but before we do that, why don't we just give a little bit of an update for our audience on how you got to where you are. It's an interesting. My guests always have interesting journeys. I'm always interested in their story as well. So tell us a little bit about your story, about how you got to where you are today.
Yes, well, thank you for asking. I come from the spa and wellness industry. I started my career at Cornell Hotel School in the mid 90s, and I was studying the spa industry, which is where I spent most of my career: spas, resorts, health retreats, that type of industry. And interestingly, back then in the mid 90s, really what spa was all about are a lot of the things that we're talking about today with aging well. So it was really about eating well, eating off the land, moving your body, being in nature, and especially connecting with like-minded individuals in a secluded environment where you could really be vulnerable. So all those things, I think, are things that we're talking about today. So fast forward to March 2020, I've been coasting along in my career in the spa and wellness industry, and then came back from a conference in South Carolina with COVID.
Wow.
And all my clients, one after another, were like, spas are shutting down. Sorry. So luckily, I had a little bit of a lifeline to support me, but I had a lot of free time, that's for sure. And my grandparents had helped found a life plan community, formerly called CCRC, Continuing Care Retirement Community, outside of Baltimore. They were Quakers, and they founded a CCRC called Broadmead. And both sets of my grandparents and both sides of my mom and dad aged out there. So I spent a lot of time there, and it was one of the best in the country. But what I realized pretty quickly was that there was a lot of shortcomings. It was very much an institutional approach. I mean, we could have a whole hour just talking about traditional senior living versus new models of senior living, but it was very much traditional senior living. My grandparents worked in the community garden, but none of that food ever made it into the actual food. It was like the trucks drove up and the cans were opened, and that was what they were served. And wellness wasn't really a conversation. This was back in the 70s, 80s, and they aged out there until they passed. But what I realized pretty quickly during COVID was that the senior living industry was rapidly changing. And some friends of mine from the spa and wellness industry were starting to get jobs. One of my friends was corporate spa director at Lanham Resorts, and now he's at Mather, for example, which is a senior living, nonprofit senior living community.
Mm-hmm.
So there's been this infiltration of wellness into senior living. So I thought the best way for me to learn about the industry would be to interview experts. So I started my
Mm-hmm.
podcast, and I'm sure that you and I kind of have that same philosophy of let's get somebody smart and come out of it
Right.
smarter, right? So
Right.
I just
Exactly.
started interviewing people that I thought were innovative. So the focus is innovation in aging well, innovation in alternative housing models, and like you talked about, purpose, lifelong learning, combating ageism, all those kind of things. So we interview authors and developers, media personalities such as yourself. We're going to get you on my show soon, Ron.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah, so it's been a huge learning experience. We're going on 4.5 years and 210 episodes. And that's been really kind of the core of the work that Glowing Older has done, are just bringing together conversations, like you said, changing the landscape of aging one conversation at a time.
Right. Right. So we came at it from different ways, but I find it interesting that we kind of set on this course around the same time, right? In I guess
Yes. And we have
2020.
about the
So
same episodes, I think.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I don't know. I guess they're out of COVID gave a certain period of contemplation. Like, okay, what now? And so this is. I mean, there were a lot of horrible things about it, but there were some interesting, unexpected results. And I think that these sorts of discussions, and of course, it gave us a lot more experience dealing with Zoom. Dealing with this kind of communication, which was
Yeah.
an
Yeah.
alternative for people who couldn't connect.
Yeah, and Ron, I think we could probably both agree that, and a lot of experts. I had Lauren Dunning from the Milken Institute on this
Mm,
morning on the show, but I think we can all agree that things are starting to change. There are
hmm.
more conversations than there were 4.5 years ago. That we call it the last acceptable ism, the ageism piece, which Ashton Applewhite would say is no longer an acceptable ism, but it's still a huge issue. When it comes to quality of life and aging well, it comes up again and again. But I think that the work that we're doing together really kind of changes people's opinions, whether it's one person at a time or groups of people. Or so it's really important to have these conversations. And it sounds, I mean, you and I, this is both our heart work. I mean, we're not
Right.
getting rich off this stuff, that's for sure.
But the heart's what matters. So,
Yeah.
well, as long as we're talking about ageism, and I know that we will talk about that later in the show, but this has been an issue. And for people who don't know, Ashton Applewhite is a very well-known expert who wrote the book "This Age, this rocking,
This
this
chair
chair
rocks,
rock,
a
this chair
manifesto
rock."
against ageism.
Right,
Yes.
right, right. So, and I know you've talked about this is the major obstacle. And so, how do we face that? How do we? I mean, I know you're looking at it from one particular perspective, which I think is important, which is in the wellness and beauty industry, right?
Well, yes. I mean, I tried. I mean, I
Oh,
wouldn't say
okay.
that successful. Like everyone was like, "Yeah, this is such a great idea." Because really, I came to my peers in the industry and said, "We can do better. We
Mm-hmm.
need to stop shaming people about aging and stop using the phrase anti-aging." And I really didn't
Mm,
get very far with it. But Ron, ageism was one of those things that I really was not aware of when I started my podcast. And
mm-hmm.
as I started, you're probably the same way as me. We get these themes that go through our head when you have one guest and then another and another, and there's these threads of themes that go through each episode. For me, the ageism piece was a huge wake up call because I'd have somebody that was an operator in senior living and they'd say ageism is the number one thing standing in the way of resident satisfaction. I was like, well, what does that mean? Well, maybe the
Right.
executive director is ageist and treats people without respect and dignity and agency.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe the residents are ageist against each other. The othering thing is something that
Right.
the
Right.
ageism people talk a lot about. So it just kept coming up again and again. And then I realized that the World Health Organization has deemed it a major global crisis. And then there's 3 ways that they talk about overcoming ageism very
Mm-hmm.
specifically. And you can go to the World Health Organization site. You
Mm-hmm.
could Google ageism. You can pull all of this up. It's all widely available. But the 3 ways are: number 1, looking at yourself and
Mm-hmm.
your internalized perceptions of aging. It starts with ourself. I mean, we're not going to get rid of cultural and societal ageism overnight, but if we become aware of it, maybe start pointing it out to others and not buy into it ourselves, that's the first way. Second way
Right.
is policy, which,
Mm-hmm.
Rob, we will not get into today. That would be a
Right.
whole other conversation,
Yeah,
especially in the
that's
US
right.
right
Right.
now. But the third is intergenerational connections, which is really, to me, one of the most exciting ways. As we were raised and centuries ago, we had intergenerational connections naturally. But unfortunately, that's grown out of us over the generations. And I think there's starting to be a real conversation around intentional bringing together of generations. I might have mentioned to you Haralink, which is a
Mm-hmm.
nonprofit corporation started by a 22-year-old girl. She's got 70 high schools now, I think 60 high schools. And she matches high school students that need community service hours with older adults and senior living communities. And she did that to overcome loneliness and social isolation and mental
Mm-hmm.
health issues in the young people, not the
Right.
old people, which I think is so amazing, right?
Yeah. Well, they talk about that a lot, is that they realize that yes, there is, social isolation as you get older. I mean, you lose your friends and family, so you often end up alone. However, um, from what I understand, the research has indicated that the highest levels of anxiety and stress are actually people in their 20s, even more
Yeah, and
so.
here's the quote from the Gallup poll. This is
Hmm.
from Laura Dunning from Milken. Young people experience twice the levels of loneliness than people over 65. That's
Right.
shocking.
Right, right. So recently, Nancy, we screened a film called "The Age of Love" um, on Long Island. I don't know if you've heard of that, but basically, it's a film that was done by a man whose mother had lost her spouse, and felt like, "Ugh, I'm never going to love again." So it was basically his documentary foray into the subject, with the center being a speed dating for people 70 to 90 years old.
Oh,
and,
wow.
and so when we screen this film, um, um, young people come to it as well, and their response is really like is eye opening. Like when they hear older people talking about the need for connection and love, it's like that's the same for me. It's no different. So I think that you're right about this intergeneration, and I've actually heard that some of the language is being changed, just called interage. So it's not even
You told me
generations.
that. I've been
Yeah,
bringing that up since you mentioned that, Ron,
yeah,
to
because
see
I
if
think
I can get people to really kind of start to think about it that way, because I love that expression, encourage.
yeah, it's really a continuum. So even separating the generations is all right. Well, we're making these assumptions. I mean, yes, there's obviously that separation of my generation, my kids. So that is a generation, but these issues cross over every age, and as you well know, so ageism can be ageism toward young people as well as older people.
Absolutely, and we forget that, but yes. But I think, overwhelmingly, we get the brunt of it
Right? No, that
because
that
we're a
is
youth-obsessed culture. At the end of the day, we really are, so.
yes. No, that's absolutely true. And the issue does go from senior down to young people. That's the way the discussion goes. Um, so,
Yeah.
gosh, we have so much to talk about. We're just gonna have to take a quick break.
Sure.
But folks, don't go away. We have much more to talk about with Nancy Griffin, the CEO of Glowing Older and the host of the Glowing Older podcast. So don't go anywhere.
Mike Zoric, a three-time California state champion in Greco-Roman wrestling at 114 pounds. Mike, blind since birth, was born in Hartford, Connecticut. He was a six-time national placer, including 2 seconds, 2/3, and 2/4. He also won the Veterans Folk-Style Wrestling twice at 152 pounds. In all these tournaments, he was the only blind competitor. Nancy Zorick, a creative spirit whose talents have taken her to the stage and into galleries and exhibitions in several states. Her father, a commercial artist who shared his instruments with his daughter and helped her fine-tune her natural abilities, influenced her decision to follow in his footsteps. Ms. Zorick has enjoyed a fruitful career doing what she loves. Listen Saturday mornings at 12 Eastern for the Nancy and Mike Show for heartwarming stories and interesting talk on the BBM Global Network.
Are you struggling to care for elderly parents or a spouse? Do you wonder if being a caregiver is making you sick? Are you worried about taking time off work to care for elderly parents and balance work, life, and caregiving? Has caregiving become exhausting and emotionally draining? Are you an aging adult who wants to remain independent, but you're not sure how? I'm Pamela D. Wilson. Join me for the Caring Generation radio show for caregivers and aging adults, Wednesday evenings, 6 Pacific, 7 Mountain, 8 Central, and 9 Eastern, where I answer these questions and share tips for managing stress, family relationships, health, well-being, and more. Podcasts and transcripts of The Caring Generation are on my website, PamelaDWilson.com, plus my caregiving library, online caregiver support programs, and programs for corporations interested in supporting working caregivers. Help, hope, and support for caregivers is here on The Caring Generation and PamelaDWilson.com.
Welcome back, folks. Once again, this is Ron Roel on 45 Forward. We're talking today with Nancy Griffin, the CEO of Glowing Older and the host of the Glowing Older podcast, also the founder of SeniorTrade. Before the break, we were talking with Nancy about ageism, and I wanted to then go right into more about her company, her consulting business, and the podcast. Well, first of all, I'm always interested. I'm a writer and interested in fascinating with words. I love the wordplay of glowing older. Tell me how you came up with that.
Gosh, well, I saw it in an article like 6 years ago, just an article on aging or something, and somebody had used the phrase "glowing older" in the article, and I thought, wow, that's great, And I went and found that the URL was available. It was not, it was pricey. It wasn't like like just sitting there for $5, but it was available, and so I got it, and I just really resonated with me. Because as we both know, the whole idea of attitude is so crucial, and really, I think we had this conversation last time, Ron. It's like we plan and look forward to things that we like, and like a vacation or going into college or sorority. And when it comes to planning for our later years, if we buy into this inevitable decline theory, like wah, it's all over, then it's really hard to make good decisions and plan and all that. So it starts with our attitude that those years are worth planning for.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why at Glowing Older, we're really we're sticklers on language. Just like what are the words that you're using? I just talked to the young girl from Hairlink, actually, and she sent me a letter she was going to send out, and I had to point out, we don't use the word senior in the aging world. We use the phrase older adult because research shows that it's less triggering and it's less negative. And she's like, oh, wow, that's so great. So we like to call retirement renewment, and we like to call empty nest spreading your wings. And so Glowing Older, I think, is a good example of that. It's that it's not something to dread. And it's funny because my mom is 82 and she has a group of friends, and they all have dogs, and they're all really fit, healthy women. And she says, well, we can do whatever we want now. And think about it. If you think about the generation, her friends, it's like they always had an obligation. And it was like their husband, their careers, their kids. And now it's like, I can wake up every day and I can do it whatever I want. And just that attitude of getting up every day and wanting to be alive. And that's what, I don't know if your listeners are familiar with the term ikigai, which is a Japanese term, which means literally that which gets you out of bed in the morning.
Mm.
And I
Hmm.
think it's important, we talk a lot about purpose at Glowing Older, and I'm sure you do too, Ron. And I think some people hear that word purpose and it can be misleading because they think, damn, I've taken care of everyone. I don't want a purpose. I want to sit around and do nothing.
Right.
And I would say, firstly, your purpose can be broad. It doesn't have to be necessarily babysitting your grandchildren every day. And that you should know that you're healthier if you have one,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
And that's what I
Yeah.
want people to know. It's just like become educated to know that if you have something that gets you out of bed every day, you will be happier, healthier, and live longer, which
Right.
is what we all want, right?
Exactly. Exactly. Well, I do like the language, though. I mean, I certainly it's a nice transition between getting older and then growing older. I like the connotation of growing. You're always growing at every point in your life. But then I even like even more the glowing older. I mean, to me, the glowing, I mean, there's this, expression of our, our golden years, which just seem a little bit pretentious to me. It's like, well, they're golden, but they're, but they're problematic too. But glowing to me gives a sense that there is a warmth to it. I like that. It's that, and there's a sense of energy and aura around it, which I think is important because that's what I feel about the, as we get older, there is that glow. Sometimes it's a little dimmer, but even so, it's there, and so I'm glad you've stuck with that. So and
Well,
with
I'm
your
going to
pod,
throw this back on you and Ron, ask you a question, Ron.
yeah.
How do you get people to be thinking in those terms and when the inevitable of age is some sort of decline? So it's like, given that we have this, like, how do you instruct the people that you are coaching and the people that you're interacting with to
Hmm.
yes, this is a reality. It's not total Pollyanna. It's not
Hmm.
rose-covered colored glasses. But how do you yes this, but yes, I'm going to choose
Well, I
the
guess for me, it's all part of it. So, in other words, I remember I had an interview with a guy named John Leland, a reporter from the New York Times, who wrote this book called "Happiness is a Choice You
ooh,
Make,"
yes.
and it was about people who were 85 and older, and
Ooh,
they're in depth. He followed them around for a year, and I think he ended up with 6 people he profiled, and it was very much that message that that people, to your point, they had a reason to get out of bed every day. It wasn't. It
mhm,
wasn't. It wasn't like, oh, this is fine. This is perfect. Some people were taking care of their older parent, much older parent. I mean, if they're in their 80s, yes, so much older. But it is the sense of, well, some therapists would call it, radical acceptance. But it's not just saying, oh, this is the way it is. It's like, well, this is the way it is, and what choices do I have to make? You know,
right.
to make this the best life I can and to
Yes.
enjoy it. And so there are choices, and it's not, ignoring or denying, physical challenges, but that's part of life too. It is part of a journey. And
Yes.
even, when people talk about, as people head toward the end of life, whether it's from palliative care or hospice care, and then that's still part of the journey. There, so it's not like, oh, just sit around and wait for the end. It's like, well, what is this
Right.
part of life for? How can you reflect on life at this point and still be engaged? It's not easy though.
Yes.
Yeah,
No, no one ever said it was going to be though, right?
that's right. Yeah, no, absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
But it can be. There's a lot of joy, and I think that even when people talk about caregiving for Alzheimer's, people with Alzheimer's or other forms of dementia, you know. One of the things that I hear people say is, you know what, they are still alive inside, and so
Yeah.
spend time with what they can do and who they are, not what they're not. And I think,
Yes.
that's important. And, they're, in a sense, there's an interesting gift in that. Well, they don't think about the future or the past, they're in the present. But what do people always say? Like, well, live in the present. Stop, trying to plan all the time. There is a certain, wisdom to living in the present. So acknowledge that, acknowledge what they're feeling, acknowledge their emotions, what they're capable of in life. So yeah,
Yes.
it is that balance of recognition that, ultimately, yeah, ultimately we all pass on, but even in that period of loss, right? Even in the loss, there is some gain. You sort of let go of things and you can focus on well, all right, I don't need to worry about these other things. This is what's in front of me. And now let's just be present with that and with the people around me. And in some ways, don't waste time doing things that don't matter, right? I mean, it really
Yes,
focuses
so
you.
true.
Yeah.
And I love what you said about the caregiving piece is that just to, we like to use the phrase care partner. And I
Right.
work with an organization called Connected Horse that does memory care. They work with people with cognitive impairment and their care partners with equine learning tasks and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And they use the phrase care partner because I think you can forget that you can glean joy from the person you're caring for as well.
Right.
I have a friend that looked after a 90, I think she's in her late 90s, but she told me how much she got back from that woman and how the woman
Hmm.
brought her so much joy, and she was able to become a caregiver that was open-hearted, and it was a two-way exchange of energy and information where
Exactly.
she got something too. And so I think that's again, like you said, the choice part. And also I'll add into that with the caregiving piece is the idea of wearing your own oxygen mask first, which is a huge
Correct.
core message for growing older, because you can't be your best when you're draining your battery all the time.
Hmm.
And caregiving especially, because I mean, gosh, caregiving with any chronic illness, but dementia and Alzheimer's being one of the most challenging because of the unpredictability of it. But you can really come out of the caregiving piece drained financially, emotionally, and so it's really important to fill your cup, whatever that looks like. And I know a lot of caregivers will absolutely like want to punch you in the face if you say, take a bath, or go to the spa, or
Right.
things like that. But the first one is really to ask for help.
Right.
And we talk a lot at Glowing Older. Dr. Bill Thomas, I think I mentioned him on our first call, but he's one
Hmm.
of my gurus, my aging gurus. He founded the Greenhouse Network and the Eden Alternative, and he's been an absolute advocate for finding ways of innovating the way that we age. Um, but he talks about aging is a team sport
Right.
and who is on your aging dream team. And I
Right.
think for anyone, and starting at that caregiver phase, starting in your 40s, or gosh knows, sometimes it's even earlier, but if
Hmm.
you start thinking about it early, you're much more likely to make a plan to get there. And I think we all know that most caregiving decisions happen in a crisis.
Hmm.
And I hear it again and again. Oh, mom fell and now we have to find a place. And, she's in the hospital. They're pushing her out the door and we don't know where to go. We don't know what to do. And when you're in that kind of frenetic crisis energy,
Hmm.
we do not make good decisions.
Right.
We don't. And that's why the planning piece is such a big part of what we talk about, and a values based planning piece, which is that which matters most to you. And I speak to married couples a lot. I don't know if you're married or not, Ron, but
I
I'm
am. Yeah.
divorced. But it's important to not say we want to do this and we think this, because as we get older, one of the fallacies is that we become more like. We do not. We become more individualistic and more ourselves. And oftentimes couples will need to make different plans.
Hmm.
Maybe your husband wants to go fishing in Alaska. Maybe he wants to golf 3 times a week with his buddies. Maybe you don't. Maybe you want to travel to Europe with your. So it's important to take that time and measure your values to see which ones come out on top. A
Right.
good one to think about is if you have a big home, if you're a solo ager and you have a big home and you have animals to take care of and you want to travel, then those are some serious considerations,
Hmm.
because
Hmm.
it's like the money part is huge. Obviously, the financial piece is huge, but your energy, like where are you putting your energy? So you'll find a lot of times people will downsize and have the lock and leave kind of
Mm-hmm.
situation where they can say, okay, I'm going to Europe and I'm gone, and I'm going to be gone for 2 months. So
Mm-hmm.
you have to balance all those things. And I know you mentioned the glowing older philosophy a little bit earlier, being different elements, but the
Mm-hmm.
elements for us are home, health, and heart. And
Mm-hmm.
home is, the piece of home is much more than the four walls that you live in. So when you're looking at that home piece, it's like, do I want to be near my family? Like, where do I want to be? Do I want to be near an ocean? Is it important to
Mm-hmm.
swim in the ocean every morning? Is it important to be near my grandkids? And those kind of questions. Is there transportation? Is there health care? Are there neighbors that can help? With that, all those kind of things. So that's why the planning piece is huge, because you have to take time to go through all those elements. Health, all
Right.
the aspects of health, when you have mental, physical, spiritual, emotional, all those kind of things need to be in the consideration loop. And then we loop it back to the heart piece, which is what matters most to you, not your
Right.
grandkids, not your husband, you. Not, and
Right.
I use the husband or your wife or whatever,
Right.
but that taking that time. And I don't know if you're familiar with Ron Pevney. He's the conscious aging guru. He does these conscious aging retreats, and he takes people on vision quests and
Right.
takes them into the middle of nowhere, and they don't eat, and they sit with nature, and they give themselves that time to figure it out. And
Right.
to all the listeners out there that are in this place, give yourself time and
Right.
don't rush it, and
Right.
and be okay with the unknown. And we as humans hate that.
Right. I know. Well, we are going to have to pay attention to time right now. We need to take a little bit
Yeah.
of a break, but we're going to sneak in another quick break. But folks, don't go anywhere. Obviously, we have a lot more to talk about with Nancy Griffin, the CEO of Glowing Older. Don't go away.
Dr. RC will share extraordinary resources and services that promote educational success, as well as making a difference in the lives of all social workers, as well as the lives of children, adolescents, and teens of today. She will have open discussions addressing many of the issues that we face about our youth, and how being employed in the uniquely skilled profession of social work for over 18 years has taught invaluable lessons through her personal experiences. She will also provide real-life facts, examples, and personal stories that will confirm that why serving as a child advocate is extremely beneficial when addressing the needs of the whole child. Listen live to Dare to Soar, Saturdays, 10 a.m. Eastern on the BBM Global Network, and tune in radio as Dr. RC will provide thought-provoking information that will empower, encourage, and strengthen students, families, and communities across our nation. You can also visit her at soarwithkatie.com. Author, radio show host, and coach John M. Hawkins reveals strategies to help gain perspective, build confidence, find clarity, achieve goals. John M. Hawkins' new book, Coached to Greatness: Unlock Your Full Potential with Limitless Growth, published by iUniverse. Hawkins reveals strategies to help readers accomplish more. He believes the book can coach them to greatness. Hawkins says that the best athletes get to the top of their sport with the help of coaches, mentors, and others. He shares guidance that helps readers reflect on what motivates them, rediscover and assess their core values, philosophies, and competencies, find settings that allow them to be the most productive, and track their progress towards accomplishing goals. Listen to John Hawkins' My Strategy, Saturdays, 1 p.m. Eastern on the BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio.
Welcome back, folks. Again, we're talking today with Nancy Griffin, the CEO of Glowing Older. Before the break, we were talking about her values-based approach on planning. And I think this is important because there are lots of pragmatic things we can do in terms of planning for our older years. But based on what? And so I think it's important that you talk about, well, to make these decisions, what are the values you're basing it on in these three areas of home, health, and heart. So let's expand that a little bit more. You were talking about your own values, and I'll share some of mine.
Yeah. I mean, I had a big October 2020 23, so about a year and a half ago, I have been a lifelong horseback rider. So I've ridden horses since I was 5 years old. And if you would have told me if I could ever stop riding horses, I would never stop. I was going to be that one to whip their helmet off and have the gray hair flowing in the wind, 70-year-old horseback rider jumping the jumps. And in October 2023, I had a very serious accident. Jumping a little jump, but I landed head first into a wall, basically.
Wow.
Luckily, I was wearing a good helmet and an air vest, which inflated on the sides of my head. But I woke up in the hospital. I was unconscious. Don't remember anything. But right after that happened, my family and my close friends were like, "Okay, Nance, you've had a good run, but you're not going to ride anymore. You've had head injuries. I know from my podcast and all the people I've interviewed, and too, brain health, that cumulative head trauma is no bueno, and I'm 60 years old. So I took out my values deck and looked at the whole thing. My first thought was, screw you guys. Like everyone that was saying this, I was like, nobody's going to tell me what to do, because one of my core values is persistence. It got me to graduate school. It got me to live in Europe. It got me to start my entrepreneurial ventures. That persistence is one of my core values. So I was like, forget you guys. I'm going to do it. But we have to balance our values. So when I looked at some of my other values, one of my core values is family and friends that were really wanting me to stay as healthy as possible and knew I'd had a good run and that it was probably time to stop. The other one was that I value my brain. I make money from my brain. I like my creativity. I want my synapses working as well as possible. And I know that cumulative head trauma leads to cognitive impairment. So when I balanced all those things, what I decided to do was work with Connected Horse, helping them with their event planning and fundraising and blogging and all that kind of stuff. And I hope that my horses will become equine assisted learning horses. And I still have my horses. I mean, we don't give up on our family. So I retired my horses, but I hope to get into this equine assisted learning because as anyone that's had horses knows that it's sort of in our blood and we can't not have horses in our lives. So every time I go see my retired horses, I thank goodness that I love them as much as I do, because they're not a cheap pet. But I do hope. So it's this idea of I still need and want horses in my life, but I'm going to rethink this and not sit on a horse anymore. And it's funny, I still dream that I ride. And then I'm like, oh, shoot, I shouldn't be riding. But so that's a good example, Ron. I don't know if you have any examples, but at our Better of the Age events, I've had people raise their hands and men said, I used to motorcycle ride and I gave that up, or whatever it is. I don't know if there's anything that you've had to decide based on your values about home health and heart that you would want to share.
Well, I think that there are a lot of adjustments we've had to make. I mean, first of all is a notion that I think in the therapy community is known as sort of radical acceptance. It's a sort of understanding of when things are what they are. It doesn't mean you'd say, well, too bad, that's the way it is. It is the way it is, but then by accepting the way things are sometimes, it gives you an avenue to move forward in other ways, as opposed to knocking your head and wanting things to change. So it's really, it's basically helped me understand I know this is a word that's used a lot, but I think it is an important word, which is resilience. Being able to be flexible in terms of as you and I know, the term is plan, don't predict. You don't know what's going to happen, but you can plan. And sometimes, things that the unexpected things are you can sort of expect them. So you can do more planning than you might let on. But then going back to what you mentioned earlier, some of the things I did when I was younger that I really enjoyed was being in nature, and particularly bird watching. And I used to like to go out and look for birds, and like a lot of young birders love bird lists. You can add to your list every year. So that's been harder over the years. I can't travel that much, and So you start thinking, well, how important is the list? Is it the experience of seeing the birds every day? And it's also, for me, interestingly, a philosophical thing happened with me, which is there have been a couple times when I've gone out and realized that there are different approaches to learning and seeing things in life. And in bird watching, you can go out and you can look specifically for birds. I want to go here and find this bird or that bird. So you can search for things intentionally, but then sometimes you can just sit in a particular habitat. Say it's a feeding area or it's an open field, and you can just sit and wait, and the birds will come to you. So, you know, it's like realizing that there are different ways to learn in life and experience, and some of that's
Interesting.
about patience and about, you know,
Yes.
yes, it's important to be intentional and search, but sometimes sit back and things will come to you if you just pause and observe and wait. Um, so that's something that, I think has been important to me to come to these realizations, and to your point also about values, like who what's important, basically the people you have in your
Yeah.
life. And one of the realities is that you will lose people. That's part of life, whether they pass on or they move on. So find ways to still connect with them, but also find new people in your life, you know.
Yes.
Um, and I think that's, you know, so there are, when people talk about lifelong friends, there's certainly a great deal of importance to that, but there's also replacement, finding new people, and to what you're mentioning before, younger people. You don't have to be like, oh, in your own age cohort all the time. There's a lot of vitality in crossing over with younger people and even older people. So, yeah, I mean, there are a couple of things we do every year, which is um, knowing how everyone's lives and families are hectic during the holidays. What we like to do is we like to have a first day party every year. So at the afternoon of January 1st, we just have people come over, bring food, bring potluck, and
Uh-huh.
it's family and friends. Bring in the new year without
Love that.
staying up at midnight
You got a
the
good
night
night's
before.
sleep the night before, right?
Right, 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 right. Yeah. So I wanted to just talking about this sort of you mentioned before about having these conversations with people, which is what you do a lot. It's not always so easy. And in our previous conversation, I love the idea that you mentioned, your idea of getting people together in informal groups and having, wine and cheese.
I thought you were going to say getting people drunk.
No, well,
No, we don't get
no, but just
no.
how do you get people to think about these conversations, wine and cheese and conversation? I love that idea. Tell us about some of these things.
Yeah, well, we started doing them at country clubs, and we've done some at senior living communities. But it's really a wine tasting. So we talk about things that get better with age. I think I might have mentioned um, to you in our last conversation that Dr. Bill Thomas talks about things that get better with age are often invisible.
Mm-hmm.
Well, with wine, it's that way. I mean, like it's like, well, why does a young wine go through a process by which it turns into a delicious older wine, and why does cheese go through a process? So we start with that conversation, and the real kind of the real common denominator between us and the wine and the cheese is we all become more complex, which is like kind of that's the difference. Like, so we
Mm.
do the food and wine pairings, and then in between we talk about positive aging, why it's important to talk about positive aging, what might stand in the way of positive aging, which is of course that the big A word, which is the ageism piece. Then we
Mm-hmm.
talk about the values, we talk about solo aging, we'll talk about having a purpose, and a lot, these are people with means that we
Mm-hmm.
speak with at these events, but these issues are universal. And all the money in the world really doesn't spare us from some of the things that can happen as we age. And one of those
Mm-hmm.
things are our children moving away. So
Mm.
as we did a lot of glowing older coaching and talked with adult children and older adults, we would have a conversation with the adult child who says, I don't want to take care of my parents, and I'll move to another country if it's in my face to do that. I'll do anything not to do that. And then we'll have a conversation with the older adult who will assume that it's all handled. Of course my children will take care of me. So it's like, I think there are some cultures, like my brother's married to a Thai woman, and in the Thai culture, you take care of your mother. There's no other choice than that. But in our new world, our global economy, people aren't necessarily in the same location, which is why I think the technology piece is so exciting. Ways to stay connected when we're virtual with families. But then again, I think that there's also that technology can become can make us less connected too sometimes, right?
Right. Yeah. It's it's an interesting phenomenon. The complexity of aging. I love your analogy of we get we're richer and more complex.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
Anyone
We,
that's had a really good old Bordeaux will tell you that. Right?
right. Okay, so listen, we I think we're coming up to another break. Um, so we still there's still a lot of what I want to cover. I want to talk about SeniorTrade, your media platform, and also your some of your research at Cornell. So, folks, we have a lot more to talk about still. One last segment with Nancy Griffin. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
Mike Zorek, a three-time California state champion in Greco-Roman wrestling at 114 pounds. Mike, blind since birth, was born in Hartford, Connecticut. He was a six-time national placer, including 2 seconds, 2/3, and 2/4. He also won the Veterans Folk-Style Wrestling twice at 152 pounds. In all these tournaments, he was the only blind competitor. Nancy Zorek, a creative spirit whose talents have taken her to the stage and into galleries and exhibitions in several states. Her father, a commercial artist who shared his instruments with his daughter and helped her fine-tune her natural abilities, influenced her decision to follow in his footsteps. Ms. Zorek has enjoyed a fruitful career doing what she loves. Listen Saturday mornings at 12 Eastern for the Nancy and Mike Show for heartwarming stories and interesting talk on the BBM Global Network.
Are you struggling to care for elderly parents or a spouse? Do you wonder if being a caregiver is making you sick? Are you worried about taking time off work to care for elderly parents and balance work, life, and caregiving? Has caregiving become exhausting and emotionally draining? Are you an aging adult who wants to remain independent, but you're not sure how? I'm Pamela D. Wilson. Join me for the Caring Generation radio show for caregivers and aging adults, Wednesday evenings, 6 Pacific, 7 Mountain, 8 Central, and 9 Eastern, where I answer these questions and share tips for managing stress, family relationships, health, well-being, and more. Podcasts and transcripts of the Caring Generation are on my website, PamelaDWilson.com, plus my caregiving library, online caregiver support programs, and programs for corporations interested in supporting working caregivers. Help, hope, and support for caregivers is here on the Caring Generation and PamelaDWilson.com.
Welcome back, folks. We're in our last segment today with Nancy Griffin, the CEO of Glowing Older and the Glowing Older podcast. We were talking about lots of things before the break. I wanted to come back and ask Nancy just a couple minutes about just one of her other ventures among many is her SeniorTrade, her media platform for senior living.
Yes. Well, any listeners that are in the industry that are on this call, SeniorTrade is a platform for kind of the crossover between senior living and home health services. So it's the gamut of the business of aging well. So we talk about the same issues, but it's targeted towards professionals. So we deal with age tech, and we'll deal with all kinds of different housing models like university retirement housing and all different kinds of models. But it's really to focus on innovation and those people that are really making a difference in the industry.
Right, right. And then the other thing I wanted to just touch on too, because you have a scholarly side. Talk about your involvement with Cornell.
Yeah, well, I went to the Cornell School of Hotel Administration, which no longer exists. So the new school is called the Cornell Institute for Healthy Futures,
Hmm.
and that combines hospitality, environmental design, and health policy and management into a degree that's focused towards innovation in healthcare, wellness, and senior living.
Mm-hmm.
So I am an industry scholar along with a bunch of other really smart people in
Mm-hmm.
different facets of the industry, whether it's development, architecture, or programming, design, healthcare, all these different aspects. And then we get together, we do different education, we work with the students, which is really fun to hear these students come up with these amazing ideas for solutions for aging well. So it's basically research, education, and then conferences.
Wow. Yeah. And so, how can people find out more about both this school as well as your work in general?
Well, if you want to learn about the Cornell Institute of Healthy Futures, probably best just to stick that into Google and it'll take you to the page, and then it'll
Okay.
give you the list of all the experts on the site. And then if you want to look at my work, you can visit glowingolder.com, and you can listen to the podcast on your favorite podcast platform, uh, Spotify or Apple or any. You can also access our archive on glowingolder.com. And then if you are in the industry and you want to take a look at mergers and acquisitions and the back end
Hmm.
of what's going on in the industry, that would be SeniorTrade.com.
SeniorTrade. Okay. 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 Good. Good. Um, so let's see. Any closing thoughts on what you think are some of the major takeaways that people would have about glowing older?
Oh gosh. Well, I really do think it comes back to this idea of planning,
Mm-hmm.
um, and valuing. You know, we talk a lot about values, but valuing this next stage of life. If you can manage to first become aware of ageism,
Mm-hmm.
that's I think it's a really good start for anyone that wants to take this path, right?
Mm-hmm.
Of
Mm-hmm.
what's really the path to aging well. The first path starts with yourself and
Mm-hmm.
overcoming internalized perceptions of ageism. You will start to see ageism everywhere. You
Mm-hmm.
will see a little bright light, but you will see a lot of workplace ageism. You will see a lot of ageism in the media, movies, television, all that. But if you can not buy into it, and then start looking for role models that work for you, not necessarily the super agers, you know, those
Mm-hmm. Right.
that are
Right.
that are ageist, the cover of Ageist magazine that look 25 when they're 83. No, it's really smaller steps, and it's really one of my favorite experts, Dr. Carrie Burnite, has a book coming out called Joy Span, and you had mentioned the concept of joy, which I think is really really important. Schedule a little joy into your life, whatever that looks like for you.
I love it. I love it. Okay. So I think we've come to the end of the show. I just wanted to thank you so much for a wonderful conversation, Nancy. We'll have to
Thank
leave it there
you.
for today. So thank you for that. I want to thank our my engineer, Alex, who always helps me be part of a team that gets me through the show every day. And once again, this has been Ron Roel, host of 45 Forward on Bold Brave TV. Be sure to join me next Wednesday, 7 p.m. Eastern Time, when I'll have two experienced attorneys take on the increasingly common issue, which is couples breaking up later in life. And they'll offer some practical and relatable thoughts to help silver splitters navigate this emotional transition. So,
I did
folks,
it. You can do it too.
all right, okay. Well, folks, so thanks again. Until next week, keep moving forward, 45 forward.
This This has been 45 Forward with host Ron Roel. Tune in each week as Ron tackles the many aspects of health, finance, family and friends, housing, work, and personal pursuits, all as part of an integrated plan and to take charge of your unretiring life during these uncertain times. Wednesdays, 7 p.m. Eastern on the Bold Brave TV network, powered by B2 Studios.